Hello everybody and welcome to Chess24 and welcome to my recap of Game 11 of the World Championships between Magnus Carlsen and Vishy Anand. Before today, if of course you've just joined us and you weren't aware as to the current score in the match, Magnus Carlsen was a full point ahead with 2 games to go, meaning that a win today with white for Magnus Carlsen would secure him the World Championship title, means he retains that for at least another 2 years until he plays his next match in 2016, which also means, of course, that Vishy, playing with the black pieces today, had to at least draw the game to have a fighting chance in the final game to equalise the match and go to tie breaks. Had Vishy won today, it would mean that they go into the last game all square and all to play for. So if you don't know the result, well, we're going to find out exactly what happened right now. Magnus with white started, as he has done in every match so far in this World Championship, with the e4. And unsurprisingly, we reach a Berlin, which we've seen for the 3rd time already. Rather, this is the 4th time, but the 3rd time we reach a Berlin endgame with 4 castles. If we remember, d3 was played in the first of these encounters between these 2 players, and it was in fact Magnus Carlsen who won that one. But he's gone for the Berlin endgame, where Vishy, to his credit, in their previous encounters in this match, has really held his own in this endgame. And of course I referred to the standard Berlin position after king takes d8. He defended a position where he sacrificed a piece to get a kind of fortress. He also defended very easily against Carlsen's slightly odd knight e2 line. Today, after h3, it was Vishy, however, who was the first one to deviate. We've previously been seeing the move king e8, but today he played the move bishop d7, which is also well known. The point of this move is that it gives black the option of moving the king over towards the queen side rather than the king side, and in fact that is exactly what we saw, because after knight c3, h6, this has all been played before, and now b3. The point of b3 in this particular position is, now that black has played h6 and not h5 as we saw in the other games, this g5 square is well and truly out of white's grip now, out of his ideas. So anything relating to knight g5 or bishop g5 simply has no sense. And also, if you put the bishop on f4, as we saw Magnus did against h5 a lot, it gets hit very quickly with g5. So it makes no sense to develop the bishop along that diagonal anymore, but instead the move b3 is in fact the main line. And now we see Vishy put the king on c8, so he comes this side. And the point is that his general plan here is that he wants to develop his king via b7, eventually play c5, and then decide where to put this bishop on d7. He can either put it on c6 or he can put it on e6. There are various games, very different plans. I can't go through them all here, of course, but clearly this position in many ways provides a lot more of a contest where it's a bit more dynamic compared to the other positions with king e8. So bishop b2 was played by Carlsen, and now c5, which actually in this particular position is quite a rare move, but when combined with the next move, we arrive at a position again where it's been seen before. Because after c5, well, white played the very logical move rook a d1, occupying the open file, and now b6. So Vishy solidifies this structure. This structure here we can see on the queen side with these 4 pawns is really a critical structure in the Berlin, and if you can get it in, normally it's a good thing. The drawback of black's position is that at the moment, at least, it's very difficult to get in king b7 and bishop b6. Well, king b7 loses the piece. So after rook fe1, actually, with black to move, it's a bit more tricky, because if he goes bishop c6 now, you always have to be worried about, for example, after knight d5, king b7, whether the move e6 comes in. And this idea of e6, either now or at some point, unleashing this bishop along the long diagonal, is actually strategically quite risky for black. So it's a worry. So rook fe1 is, apart from being a very standard move in this position, preparing e6 is also a waiting move, because black can't play king b7, he can't play bishop e6, c6. So what else can he play? Well, there is one more option in this position, and that is to play a5. Now, this idea of a5, which is clearly very possible with the rook on a8, threatening to go a4, it's a very difficult... The concept itself isn't difficult to understand, but certainly knowing when to play it is. There are real, very small subtleties between playing it in certain positions and whether it's good or not, and so on and so forth. So this idea of a5 is always something that white has to keep in mind, that black has to keep in mind, but he also has to time it quite correctly. And I think in this game, actually, Vichy did that. But he didn't do it straight away, because here I think you can go a4, and it just gives white a few more options if he ever wants to put the knight on b5. I don't think in this particular position it's what black should do. I think in general black should wait for white to play knight d5 and then play a5. And actually that's what we saw. Because here Vichy played the move bishop e6, which is actually correct. It's a good move. The bishop, although not ideally placed on e6, does perform a very good blockading function. There are no more e6s in the air. Yes, it controls d5 in many ways. And of course, it allows black to now start his standard plan with king b7, now that the bishop is no longer under attack. So rook f1, bishop e6. Well, white really only has one decent move here, and that's to play knight d5. And once again, in this position, white might be threatening to go knight f4 to kick this bishop away. So Vichy's response of g5 is absolutely justified. And here again, we see the standard idea of supporting this knight in the center with c4. So this was pretty much expected throughout the game. And now king b7. And once again, we reach an interesting position where it's not so easy to suggest moves for white in a lot of these positions. How to really improve. It feels like you've achieved the optimum positioning of the pieces, knight on d5. I would say that the only problem piece is probably this knight on f3. It doesn't have much scope. It's not really doing much. I'd much prefer it in somewhere more active like e4, and in fact we will see that a bit later on. But also it's the king position that we can improve here for white. So one idea was to play the move king h2, which is in fact the move Magnus played. Also the move g4, with the idea of, I beg your pardon, let's get rid of that, moving the king up like so would have been very reasonable. But king h2 has a similar kind of idea. He wants to play g4 in a certain moment, kick that knight away and put the king on g3, which would support the king's side. And the king actually is a very important piece in these Berlin endgames, as we'll soon see. So king h2 was played, and now here black can either play knight e7 straight away, or he can include the move a5. It's going to transpose a lot of the time. I think it's a good idea for black to play e5 in this particular position. It pretty much obliges white to play a4, after which knight e7 was then played. The problem with white is if you ignore this a pawn, let's say, I don't know, you play a move like rook e2, a bad move. This counterplay down the queen side is really serious, and black's strategy is also very much based on this central tension. If he can ever get in b5 or c6, break the control that white has in the center, essentially, white is going to end up being in real bad trouble. The bishops are going to come to life, the center collapses, and we got a lot of tweets through in the commentary saying, well, hey, aren't black's bishops terrible? They're really passive. Yes, but their long-term potential is superb. All black is waiting to do is position himself so that when he does break with a move like a4, with a move like b5, even with a move like g4, there are various pawn breaks that are critical to this position. Once he does that, the bishops are going to come to life. And that's really the power of two bishops in the long term. So a5, a4, knight e7 was played. There really is no other sensible move. The point of knight e7 as well is to reposition the knight either via g6 or c6. So far, Anand is playing absolutely excellently. The knight belongs on either g6 or c6. It controls a lot of squares from those posts. And it was interesting because now after knight e7, white should go g4 to avoid any ideas with g4 that black might have. So g4, And it was a critical moment where I think both knight c6 and knight g6 are very possible. Black went for knight g6 in the end, which when I first thought, I thought, well, would it have been better on c6? But the more I looked at the position, the more I thought, actually, this is a perfectly fine move. Because the knight on g6 has the added option of hopping into f4 when necessary. And I think that's very important. On top of that, it also dissuades white from ever going h4, which is one of the breaks that he has in his position. So on balance, I think it was a good decision to play knight g6. White very much expectedly played king g3, and black once again played the correct move, bishop to e7. So I think black's idea now is he wants to connect the rooks, bring a rook to d8, and then again wait for white to show his hand. After bishop e7, it's not really advisable to take on e7 with the knight here, because after knight takes e7, black is very quick to go rook a d8 next move. And with the opposite colour bishops, it really promises nothing for white here. Whereas black can also start thinking about this c6 b5 idea in the long term. And yeah, I just don't think it promises anything. So up till now, after bishop e7, I think both players are playing almost perfectly. White played knight d2, which is a move I mentioned before. Again, I think it's a very good move because that knight is really the knight that is not working very well in the position. h4 is now out of the window as an idea. So knight d2 certainly makes sense to reposition the knight on e4 and support the centre. Rook hd8 was played and knight e4 again. So we've reached this, and once more Vichy plays an excellent move. Now that the rook has come from h8 to d8, bishop f8 was played with the idea of rerouting the bishop to g7, just cutting out any ideas of knight takes e7 were white to ever want that. And again ask white, well, now what are you doing? And it's a very tricky position. White can play all kinds of waiting moves, bishop a1. He can play moves like f3 and so on, but they don't really seem to impress that much. Carlsen instead went for knight ef6, which is a very normal, natural-looking move. But it was here really where the first move of the game, which we got super excited about, we applauded black for playing, was the spectacular looking b5. I was talking about pawn breaks being essential to this position. I don't think Magnus quite expected this one in this particular position. It looks like a whole pawn sacrifice, but actually, if we look a bit deeper, it doesn't sacrifice anything, and accepting this pawn may land white in a lot of trouble. What's the point? Well, let's say you took with the a pawn here. The natural follow-up a4 would have happened. Pawn takes pawn is the only move, and rook takes pawn. So black has sacrificed a pawn, but look how he's activated this rook. And suddenly, the c4 pawn is under huge pressure. And if white defends it, let's say with a move like rook to e4, in this position there are a whole host of moves. The move knight f4 comes to mind, even the move bishop e7, just to chop away at this knight. And then everything around here collapses. Carlsen talked about this in the press conference. He said, if I'm not careful, my whole centre is going to crumble. And if that happens, black is in really good shape. So a takes b5 just gives black way too much counterplay. On the same note, c takes b5 would run into the really cute move, pawn to c6. Again, hitting this knight. And the point is that if you take this pawn off, king takes, suddenly this white knight has got absolutely no protection. It has to move, it's under attack. But after knight e3 and now the simple takes, and bishop takes b3, suddenly we see that black has regained his pawn. But not only that, look at the dire straits of white's position. This pawn is now en prise, the king is well placed, the c pawn is running up the board, e5 is weak. Basically, white is in huge danger here. So b5 was just an excellent move by Vichy. However, Magnus, being the world champion, being as clever as he is in these kinds of positions, he wasn't going to give black that kind of chance and played the very good move, I think, from a practical point of view, bishop to c3, which now may very well threaten an exchange, taking this pawn off on b5. So I think black had to exchange a pair of pawns and then played, again, another very decent move, king to c6, which gets out of the way of the b file, but also potentially prepares a rook invasion for black down the b file. So it was around here, very tense position, very, very dynamic now, all three results in play. Carlsen from the live stream at least, looked very, very worried at this moment and ended up playing the move King F3, which he said in the press conference he wasn't sure whether it was the best move in the position, but I actually think it was a pretty decent move. The point of it is he actually wants to use the king, which you see very rarely, as a supporting piece in the middle of the board, and it seemed very rarely, certainly with so many other pieces still floating around it. So I was quite happy with this move. But it was really here where I think after there were a few moves that could be played, and I think it was Vichy who perhaps made his first, maybe not bad move, but his first slight inaccuracy. I think what he could have done in this position is to play the move Bishop E7. And the point is that if you go Knight takes E7, well, that runs into Knight takes E7, and you're going to really struggle to defend this C4 pawn. Also, if you go King E4, you can now think about taking this off, and then even taking this guy off and playing King D6. Now, Vichy said he saw this position in the post-mortem and wasn't sure about it, but I think it's quite clear that what Black has managed to gain somewhat of an initiative. This knight is a real pesky piece coming into F4. The king is very much exposed on E4, and the pawn on D5 is super weak. Just to check to win it, or Knight F4 as well combined, it looks very dangerous. And I think from a practical point of view, given that Vichy, it wasn't a must-win scenario, but it was certainly a must-not-lose scenario, perhaps he should have tried this. I think that was a real good attempt. Instead, he played the move Rook DB8, which was also very interesting, with the idea of coming down via B3 or perhaps even via B4. We're going to see that in a second. And it was still around here. I was kind of optimistic about his chances, in as much as I thought he could create some problems for white. Magnus played King E4 because the king doesn't sit well on F3 at all, so he played King E4, and it was really now where we saw the absolute critical moment of this particular game. And Vichy decided to go for the Petrosian-like exchange sacrifice Rook B4, which I think in hindsight can be criticised. I think he should have just lumped for the more natural Rook to B3, of course threatening ideas like Rook A3, just pressurising along the 6th rank even around here. And were white to go Rook B1, well, Black can play Rook A3, but he can also just go Rook AB8. And the point is that after takes, if white takes on A5, Rook A3, and now if he takes on C7, Rook takes A4, Vichy thought it was about equal here, but I have to say I think Black's got a certain initiative. C4 is weak, the knights are treading on each other's toes, the bishop looks awfully strange here on C7. You don't really feel the pawn difference, and I think this would have promised Black a little something. And I think even despite Rook AB8, there might, on move 28, there might even be other options. But I think really that's what Vichy should have gone for. Rook B4, though, was applauded by many, including myself, at least for his bravery, because it is a big move to play at this moment in the match. A loss means you are out, and to give up a whole exchange is serious. And Magnus said in the press conference that he's one of these guys who is quite materialistic. He does like to take material when it's offered to him. But it does make a lot of sense, the exchange sacrifice. Well, he did take it. Bishop takes B4. And now again, Vichy played very quickly. He played C takes B4. But I'm wondering if A takes B4, allowing the rook to come into the game, was perhaps even more accurate. But again, that's something that would require a huge amount of analysis. C takes B4, though, Vichy's choice did make lots of sense, because now, apart from undoubling the pawns, you allow the bishop some room down this diagonal. You even allow the king to join the action if necessary. So C takes B4 was played, and now Magnus played what I believe was the best move of the game so far, certainly from his perspective, the move Knight H5. He said also in the press conference that he was extremely proud of this move. It's a very, very strong move. The point is that this bishop on E6 is holding Black's position together. There are no E6s. There is problems along this diagonal. It's really the problem piece. And Knight H5 has got the very simple idea of preparing F4, and after pawn takes pawn, play knight takes pawn, and there's no way for Black to maintain that bishop there. So after King B7, F4 was in fact played. And after pawn takes pawn, it's possible that the move bishop d7 was even better, but that's a very tricky move to see, especially when they were getting so short of time. G takes f4 is the human move, and now knight takes f4. The point is that now after knight takes, we're following the game. The bishop has to go. Yes, it can win the pawn on c4, but we suddenly see Carlsen's real idea. He understood that by giving up this pawn on c4, his rooks get active. And of course, when you're to exchange up for a bishop and a pawn, or sometimes even a bishop on 2 pawns, it's very important to make sure that your rooks are active. And after bishop takes c4, he played rook d7. And it was around here where we were really starting to think, oh, you know what, Vishy has mishandled this. He's misevaluated this exchange sacrifice in the following moves. Perhaps he didn't see knight h5. It's a very difficult move to see. And after rook d7, we were really thinking, well, Magnus has got great chances in this position. Well, what's the point of the move? Simply, he wants to attack this weak pawn on c7. And again, there are various options for black, but he played the most human one. Rook to a6 to bring the rook to c6. But now a very important blow that white had. Knight to d5. Threatening rook takes c7, but also stopping the protection of the f7 pawn from the bishop. So after rook c6, he could just gobble on f7. And suddenly things were looking really desperate for Vishy, threatening to take this bishop off, has to go bishop c5, and now another very important tactical blow. Rook takes c7. We saw this, not that difficult to see, but even still requires nerves of steel. And after rook takes c7, you have to take and knight takes. And the point is that were you to recapture on c7, the move rook c1 just goes to show how powerful rooks are on the open files sometimes, just going to eat at least one of those bishops, and just with a decisive advantage. So after knight takes c7, Vishy, well, we got to give him kudos for finding king c6. Now rook c1 actually would be a huge blunder, because that would run into b3. And rook takes c4 is impossible due to b2, and black would win. And suddenly after b3, things start to get very, very tricky indeed. For example, if the knight comes back, black can just play king takes b5, and suddenly, if we compare this position to the game position, white is about 3 tempo behind, and it may even be the case that black has got real decent chances to hold this position. Instead, though, Carlsen really showed, from move 29 onwards, just a perfect game. Played the brilliant move knight b5. It's not brilliant because the move itself is so difficult to see. It's brilliant because rook c1, especially short on time, looked so tempting. And the point after knight b5 is that now, after exchanging everything off and e6, firstly, the rook is much better situated on e1, supporting this pawn. And secondly, black just hasn't got the pawns going further enough down the board. And the game, well, started to look very ominous for Vishy. He played b3, got to move 40, but now the very simple king d3, bringing the king towards the pawns, making it a lot more difficult for black to advance them, and threatening e7 looked absolutely devastating. Vishy played the obvious move, bishop e7, but another brilliant move here from Magnus. Played the move h4, threatening to get another pawn going. And after, well, you can't take on h4 because that runs into e7, and takes b2, I've got king c2, and even a4, I've just got king c3, and those pawns aren't going anywhere. So after h4, you simply can't take. Vishy played a4, has to, but after g5, Magnus had it all calculated. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. Again, you can't take because rook e5 check, winning the bishop and queening the pawn. So Vishy played a3, but now after king c3 and a quick look at the position, Vishy realised there was no hope. The king just manages to patrol these pawns. They're not queening. Magnus is just threatening to play g6 or e6, e7 and queen, and there's really no hope, and Vishy quite rightfully threw in the towel here, meaning that with that win, Magnus Carlsen remains world champion. Congratulations to him, a deserved winner. My general summary of this match is that, of course, compared to Chennai last year, Vishy played a lot better chess. He, from the get-go, actually played a lot better. He, in his press conference, said that he thought his black games were not so good. I have a slightly different opinion. I actually think the main reason for its downfall in this match was not because Magnus played brilliant chess. We saw so many moments where Vichy had promising positions. We even saw Magnus make a very rare, simple blunder where he blundered this knight takes e5 move, which we've seen time and time and again in articles since that match. Apart from that obvious blunder, I think the big problem that Vichy had in this match, and really the reason why he lost it, was because he didn't take advantage of the positions in which he had a slightly better position and one that he could press. He liquidated too quickly. And there are at least 2 games, I believe, and we'll put this online on Chess24 following this summary, where he could have just, even though perhaps not won the game, he could have put Magnus under more pressure. And if you don't put Magnus under pressure, he's simply not going to crack. And as a result, by not pushing in those games, Magnus had a free ride. And when Magnus did have his opportunities, he really took them. And also, let's remember that Magnus himself, look at the games he played where he tried to press. 122 moves in that Berlin endgame, and so on and so forth. He really has got the hunger and the desire to win the games. And I think that Vichy lacked that. Maybe it was, one could argue it was a lack of hunger. One could argue it was a lack of determination. But actually, I think it was also a nerves and psychological factor. I think Vichy just didn't, he admitted it himself in the press conference, I don't think he dealt with the nerves as well as Magnus did. And nerves is a huge part of chess, especially at World Championship levels. So a lot of things we're going to come to analyse after this match. One thing's for sure, Magnus Carlsen is still world champion, at least for another 2 years. Congratulations to him. I hope you've all enjoyed my recaps of the rounds. Of course, there are no more games in this World Championships. However, that doesn't mean that you can't check out what we've got else on the Chess24 website. We've got a lot of really great series, features for everybody who enjoys chess, loves chess to check out, improve your chess, learn chess, play chess. It's all here on Chess24. Become a premium member. Enjoy everything that we have. It's a bargain at only €89 a month. Make sure you become a premium member, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the next transmission live on Chess24. But for now, wish you all a very pleasant evening, and again, congratulations, Magnus Carlsen, world champion once more.